When you clap it, you are on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being produced here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future. And I thank our producer, Richard Wicca, for all his help of all kinds. Thanks, Richard. And as your host, I'm your host, Vicki Ross. I'm the executive director at the Western New York Peace Center, and I'm very excited for this part two of Mother Earth justice that we're talking about. And this one is really about sort of putting it all together. So I'm very excited about our two very special guests. One, I'll just go around counterclockwise. That's what the indigenous people do in this part of the world. Kelly Camacho. Hi, Kelly.
Oh, hey, Vicki.
So Kelly and I just were on a wonderful trip out to Minnesota, defending the sacred, trying to help stop Line 3. I think we did our bit to help pause Line 3. And Kelly is the climate justice organizer, chief climate justice organizer for Push Buffalo. Hi. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for all your great work that we've been doing together.
Oh, definitely thank you. And I can't wait to get back out there at some point and defend the sacred some more.
Yes, we'll be doing some more of that. And we can do some more of it right here, too, because there's plenty to do here, too, which brings me to our second very special guest, Kathy McGoldrick. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Vicki.
So, Kathy, I'm trying to remember. I don't think you've been on the show before, right?
No.
No, but Kathy has done all kinds of things. Now, I hope you don't mind that I introduced you not only as part of the West Valley Coalition, but also as the Peace Center's the Western New York Peace Center's special representative to the Southern Tier. So, which is why you've won, like you don't have enough to do. Right?
So it all fits together. It all works together.
Well, it does work together, and there's just so much of it. And we have to make our part work together back to defending the sacred. So
right.
The water, the people, and the planet. I love that, people and the planet. I've been using that a lot, right? So anyway, so we talked in the last hour quite a bit about all the pipelines, and we keep sort of moving up towards a couple of points where the things that we're going to talk about will be there. So I want to start with the legislation. So I know there was the Green New Deal that got a lot of media attention, maybe not enough, but the idea being a really, what I'm going to call a just transition, and that work, which seemed obvious to me, that we want to take the work that is the change, the making of the change, is the way to employ people. So you employ them in making the change, and then you're solving all your problems at once. So it's environmental justice, economic justice, and racial justice, especially, for groups that have been marginalized and who have suffered economically, environmentally, and all kinds of other ways. So Kelly is one who, I think you might be one of the first people I heard mention the Climate and Community Investment Act, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do not worry about the acronym. I struggle with acronyms all the time, and in this line of work, there are so many acronyms, I'm constantly losing my mind. So
yes.
What I spend a lot of my time working on is the Climate and Community Investment Act. So our story starts a little bit further in the past, where in 2019, New York Renews, which is this huge coalition that consists of over 200 plus organizations, they work together to pass the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act.
Part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're a small part of that. Yep. And
it's such a massive coalition.
And it was such a even longer name to remember with acronyms also.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the same idea. Right?
Yeah, so I botched the CLCPA a lot. So this was kind of where we set our goals for where we wanted to be with renewables and how we wanted to cut our use of fossil fuels. And so this set all of our standards for that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's happening by 2050. So then this month, the coalition used like people power to introduce the second bill, which is the CCIA, the Climate and Community Investment Act. And so what this does is this generates the money we need for the just transition and kind of is the money piece of the CLCPA. And so what this does is it creates $15 billion per year. And so you might ask yourself, well, how does it do that, Kelly? And so essentially what we do is we create a fee on corporate polluters. So the large companies, I think for us in our part of New York State, it would be National Grid's a huge polluter. And so these corporations that continue to deny climate change is real, but keep us dependent on fossil fuels. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're taking that money that disproportionately comes from polluting poor and working class and Black, Indigenous people of color, to then switch it back and reinvest that money back into these communities. So it goes back to green transportation, green jobs training. It goes back into nonprofits and communities. It goes into solutions like community solar. So a lot of things that kind of my organization's already kind of working on. This is what we're trying to get money put back into because it's what we really need most.
Right. Well, that sounds wonderful. I mean, I think it really, really couldn't be more sensible and more of what we need. So the money would come from polluters means are they getting charged for the current pollution, past pollution, and I want to make a special mention of National Fuel, which has been very key, and we were just talking about NAPL. Isn't that National Fuel? That's their baby. They're the ones who've been pursuing that to the detriment of the community.
Yeah, National Fuel, so National Grid is also a huge one, and I just wanted to drop it really quick because we were talking about National Fuel and National Grid.
Sure.
So National Grid is actually currently trying to raise their rates on people who get their utilities in like the whole Western New York area. So us, Syracuse, and Albany, I believe, are all having rates increase. And so if you get both electric and heat from National Grid, it equates to about $100 a year increase in your payments. And they kind of dropped it in a press release back in July where the kind of heading was, oh, we're going to be doing COVID relief. And so it's this whole thing where you have to apply to get COVID relief. But then under the heading, in the details, it talks about how they actually want to raise rates on everybody else. So it's all work that really just intertwines and intersects, and it makes sense that all these things are happening. But to answer your question, unfortunately, it's not past pollution, but starting at current levels of pollution, it charges about $55 per ton, which doesn't seem like a lot, but with all that pollution, it adds up to easily $15 billion a year.
Really? So I wonder, and I want to say one of the things that we'll be talking about is West Valley, and I want to bring West Valley into it right away because it immediately begs to be brought up in that kind of way because here we have, well, here, why don't you say, why don't I turn it over to you, Kathy, about what are your thoughts about West Valley when you hear about this?
Well, I think one of the things is it's a great example of what not to do. One of the issues with waste, which is what we're dealing with at West Valley now, just to give you a little background, in the late 1960s, National Fuel Services, which was a private company, tried to reprocess some of the waste coming from power plants, some of the fuel rods, as
the nuclear, right?
Nuclear, yes.
Right.
Nuclear waste, yes, I'm sorry. From nuclear plants, from electric plants.
Mm-hmm.
They were not tremendously successful, and I'm giving you just a real down and dirty,
right.
As environmental and geologic issues came forward and they were going to have to revamp, it became too expensive for them. They just kind of walked away. And it was left that way for quite a while until an environmental organization, the West Valley Coalition, started by a woman named Carol Mongerson, started looking into the issue. And eventually there was an act passed by the federal government saying, the West Valley Act, that we have to clean this place up. And we've been doing that now since the 80s. And I have to give the Department of Energy, who's now running the show, a lot of credit. They've done some good work, and there's no doubt about that. Lots of you probably already know that they've taken a lot of the high-level waste and put it into real glass logs, which are still on site. But they've done a bulk of the work. However, now we're to a point where we're demolishing buildings and looking to see how we're going to leave this place permanently. So when I hear you talk, I mean, I hear you talking about the expense of fuel. And one of the things that is troubling about the nuclear industry, and one of the reasons I'm concerned about our present administration even thinking about nuclear, is that nobody ever considers the cost of how you get rid of this waste when they look at the cost of power. And everybody talks about it being a cheap, renewable source. Well, it's not cheap and it's not renewable. We're struggling with where to put waste. And a lot of the waste that comes out of nuclear power plants is very high level. We have no high level waste repository in the United States. So most of these fuel rods are sitting at nuclear power plants. So again, to start out by saying this shouldn't even be a thought in anybody's head right now. We should be looking at truly green energy and
Yes.
completely ignoring nuclear energy.
Right.
So that's, I think, how we tie into what we've already talked about here. This, and I can talk a little bit more about what the cleanup there, but I did want to make that point.
Well, I definitely want to talk more about the cleanup, but I definitely am always happy to talk about how not clean nuclear energy is. There is nothing freaking clean about it. How people can say that the most highly polluting thing in the world that is nuclear waste or nuclear, whether it's depleted or enriched uranium, that uranium, which has a half-life of, what is it, how many, a 500,000 years or something like that, is nothing clean about it, and they have not gotten any progress in how to clean it up. So until that was solved, there's no talking about it's clean. It's not clean at all. Yes, it doesn't it doesn't have the problem with the hydrocarbons. But
That's right.
But the waste is even more damaging.
The waste can be, yes, and for hundreds of thousands of years.
Right.
Of
Right.
it.
So
Yep.
out of the question. I mean, actually, when we talk about Andrew Cuomo, and there's been plenty of talk about Andrew Cuomo, one of the biggest things worst things that he did, he's done two of the worst things. One of them has to do with blacklisting people over supporting, boycott, divestment, and sanction about Israel, which wasn't specific, but it was very clear. That was one. But the other one was what was it, an $8 billion giveaway to the nuclear industry.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah, so nothing clean about it. So what? But so when I'm thinking about is when we're talking about the CCIA and talking about finding. Well, first of all, you did say so. So West Valley was done by National Fuel in the beginning.
No, it was a company called Nuclear Fuel Services. I don't believe.
Nuclear Fuel Services, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was hearing National Fuel. It's nuclear
No,
fuel.
no.
Yeah, I didn't think it was National Fuel. Yeah. So, but anyway, and they went out of business, right?
Yes.
That's the usual. It's like, oh, so sorry, we're done. Where are they? Who's paying? We don't exist. Yeah. So that's the first problem. But it's still, the problem is, and this is back to it ends up being the same when we were talking about the pipelines, is that the companies come in, but then when all the problems come, I'm sorry, this is a Superfund site. We're out of business. We can't absorb the cost. So sorry, our mistake.
Well, one of the things
Payers pay.
One of the things I find interesting is that nobody ever considers or considered the cost of spent nuclear fuel when they talk about the cost per kilowatt hour of power that comes from nuclear power plants. However, the minute somebody wants to put up a windmill, all you hear about is the cost of those structures that will be left there and what it will take to bring them down. I mean, it's just, it's ironic that suddenly they found a way to include demolition and debris in the cost of something when it turns out to be green, but not if it's not. It's It's a, yeah.
It's so ridiculous. Just
Would you be able to speak more on how West Valley is affecting the indigenous populations in our area?
I sure can. One of the issues that we have is that, and the reason that West Valley would not have been chosen as this kind of a site these days because of siting regulations, but at the time there weren't such strict siting regulations, so it was put in a place, about 33 miles from Buffalo, but it is right in between a couple of creeks, basically, on a kind of a plateau, I guess, that both those creeks feed into the big Cattaraugus Creek. And those of you from Buffalo probably have seen, if you've gone to Zor Valley or anyway, that's the Cattaraugus Creek. It's a huge creek. It's more like a river, and it flows right through the Seneca Nation of Indians Cattaraugus Reservation. And we know that the indigenous people there, use the land and farm it and fish it and hunt it. And in the past, everything that leaked from West Valley went down that creek and went out into Lake Erie, right at the point of the Native American reservation. So the Senecas are very involved now in the cleanup, very involved in trying to be part of how the place is cleaned up, have had conversations with the Department of Energy, and are part of the Citizens Task Force, and are part of the organizations, the loosely knit group of organizations that are environmental organizations that are working to try to get the place cleaned up in the most appropriate way. But yes, those people are most affected, and probably use the land more than many other populations. So there have been studies done from an airplane showing radiation levels, and there have been some higher radiation levels on the reservation than there have been in other places surrounding the site. So they are very much affected. Was there anything specific you wanted me to address?
No, I think that really answers the question. And I definitely love that you point out the interaction with Zor as well, because I think this is the part of the year where people are going to start heading out there, and people love playing in the water there. And to just think about how this is really going to affect people who have probably no idea that this is happening is incredible.
Well, the issue, we have some issues that are now kind of topical, but the long-term issue is for people in Buffalo is to think about not even stopping at the beginning of Lake Erie where the creek feeds into the lake, but all Buffalo's drinking water comes out of Lake Erie. And if in fact they decide to leave some of this, there's a lot of waste in the ground. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there's a lot of buried waste there, and we don't know what the intention is. We don't know if the intention is ultimately to get all of it out of there, which is what almost every group and municipality, all environmental groups, the Seneca Nation, everyone has said they want the place completely cleaned out, at least brought above ground, and not left with this high level waste underground. However, we don't know how that will turn out, but I think it would be incumbent upon the people of Buffalo to get involved, because ultimately, if this place erodes away, especially with climate change and the kinds of weather events we're having, all of that is in the ground could potentially go downstream.
Well, this is really why I wanted to, have both of you on, is to sort of talk about how these things relate. So there's the CCIA and also Thrive, which we haven't talked about yet. And so why don't you just, and we'll circle back to this part, but just give us a little point on Thrive, what Thrive is.
Yeah, okay, so Thrive is supposed to be a transformational economic recovery package. So this is going to be introduced in Congress in April 2020, so that's coming up soon, tomorrow. So it's basically based on 8 pillars. So it's creating millions of good, safe jobs with access to unions, building power of workers to fight inequality, investing in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, strengthening and healing nation-to-nation relationships with sovereign Native nations, while also combating environmental injustice and ensuring healthy lives for all, averting climate and environmental catastrophe, which is huge, is what we were just talking about, ensuring fairness for workers and communities affected by economic transitions, and reinvesting in public institutions that enable workers and communities to thrive. Unintended.
So this is why I was thinking, first of all, the biggest thing that I've been hearing about West Valley is as the demolition is going on, is that it needs to be a covered space so that it's not just having the pollution just sort of land anywhere and go, in the air and the water and just travel wherever it travels. And also the extreme monitoring, not just a couple of little sites, but that it should be very pervasive, the monitoring, that it should be high, it should be low, it should be far, it should be frequent, it should be all of that, right? And so all of that takes money. And
Right.
so, let us pair that up with, could you tell us a little bit about what the recent findings are, that it's even worse than we thought?
Well, you're talking, I think, about a couple of different things here. One of the things that we found out actually a couple of years ago, but we didn't recognize, at least I didn't speak for myself, the severity of it was that in collecting and picking up some boxes with forklifts of some high level waste, that it actually leaked, got onto the cuffs of some workers. They considered it, I think, not a big event, but a major event. But some of those boxes are still sitting outside. Some, I think, of the hotter ones have been put in a building. Mm-hmm. We don't know what building. We don't know what's sitting outside. We asked where the boxes that remain outside are left, and we were told we couldn't have that information for security reasons. So that's kind of a mystery, and it's disturbing because we don't have any exact figures on the activity of or what exactly is in those boxes, and that was just brought up in a meeting. Although we were told about it, it was kind of underplayed in 2019 when we heard about this at a meeting. But I think, Vicki, one of the things you're talking about is another thing, and they are demolishing now because there's two phases to the plan at West Valley. This phase we're still in is really kind of demolishing all the above ground stuff, leaving up buildings that they're using, but getting rid of all the old processing plants and things like that. And they're demolishing, or going to be demolishing, the main plant process building, which is very, very radioactive. They're doing a lot of work to they're using nitrogen in some of the hottest rooms, which is basically like shearing off with kind of high-powered water, I believe it is, or a whole, I don't know if it's water, don't quote me on that, but they're kind of shearing off the outside of these cement walls, and they'll be collecting that and sending that away for storage. But then they will be demolishing this building, which is very hot. They've already said that there's no way they can get all this high-level radioactivity, especially in the corners where they can't get this equipment right in there. Right. So unless they find a way to do that, they will be demolishing this building with still quite a bit of radioactivity left in it. Even if they do manage to take care of these corners, the building is still going to be radioactive. We don't know with what. We have not gotten an inventory. We've been asking for a year. So has the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they still have not gotten those figures, although we're now told that they will soon be giving those figures to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and then we can see them. So they'll be demolishing the building, and what we have asked, the community has asked, and the community is concerned that there will be airborne radiation. They have asked that the building be covered, and they have covered buildings. The Department of Energy has done this with other buildings that were radioactive, but we're told that those buildings that have been covered were sort of in places where there were more people working around, where it was dangerous, very close. And they're sort of saying they're not going to do it. So we're also concerned because as they demolish, they're going to be using water, a mist, to keep the dust down. And we're concerned about that water, which they say that the contractor says they will be collecting and then cleaning and then, putting out. But we're
how do you clean radioactive water?
Well, I don't know exactly what they're going to do with it, but they're going to be testing it, cleaning it, or putting it out in a level that is not. The thing is, there are tolerable. The government allows tolerable levels of radioactivity. The problem is every time somebody else lets something go that has a tolerable level, it's adding to background radiation. So in the United States, our background radiation, probably all over the world is going up, because of places like, Japan and 3 Mile Island, and we're continuously, our background radiation is going up. So in any case, we have asked, first of all, that they cover this building, and secondly, that they monitor the air and the water off-site. And at this point, we can't even get a commitment to get any monitors off-site. They are monitoring the air on-site and just around the premises. But we've asked that there be air monitors farther away just to determine, whether or not there have been any accidental leaks. We're not getting very far right now,
So one of the things I want to say as somebody who lives in Buffalo, I mean, we in Buffalo are very concerned, and it's been a concern right along, not only for our relations, our indigenous relations who live right there and who are suffering through this, and other people who live right there and are suffering through this. And I can't help mentioning at this point Roswell Park, and why are we a center for cancer research? One asks. Well, because we have all kinds of radiation, and we have West Valley, and there's radioactivity up on the Tuscarora Reservation. There's remains of the Manhattan Project, and all the nuclear activity around that. So we have quite a bit of nuclear contamination in Western New York. So, and we have the Great Lakes. So once again, everything that we said in the previous thing when we were talking about the fungibility of water, the water table and the aquifer and everything, and then the 40% of the world's fresh water supply is right there. So,
exactly.
So all of this, so I feel very concerned. Certainly the Western New York Peace Center feels very concerned, and lots of other groups do. So this is why I wondered, shouldn't the CCIA, shouldn't Thrive be a possible avenue for some of this? Because it's the environmental, economic, and racial justice elements are all right there.
Mm-hmm.
And the expenses are right there. And so, and the companies and the people to clean it up are not right there, right? So this would be a way of including, our region's very specific needs. Because one of the questions has always been who's paying for it and how much is it going to be and why it got kicked down the road and kicked down the road and kicked down the road for what, 50 years?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So what do you think as somebody who's been involved, Kelly? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just sort of like, do you think, is it something, what do we need to do to should it be after the thing is passed, or is it before? Is there a way of sort of seeing that this gets included, or this kind of thing gets included?
I think this definitely is something that would fit under what the CCIA is doing. I don't think it would cover retroactive pollution, though I would love to have something like that be put in. But this, looking at like West Valley and other things, like these are the situations we're trying to avoid. And like when we passed the CLCPA, this was something we were trying to avoid. And when we were in Minnesota protesting Line 3, it was something that I was thinking about where we've managed to pass it in New York, but it's definitely something something similar nationwide that needs to be passed because we're out there protesting a pipeline. And then when we're in New York, we still use energy that even though in New York, fracking isn't okay, but we still get things, we get it from fracking in other places.
Right. Right.
So it all applies, and we can't have environmental justice or racial justice or economic justice without having all three. It's just something we can't leave behind because when these pollutants are put out, they're put out into low-income minority areas. I mean, I'm from the east side of Buffalo, which is typically a low-income Black neighborhood, and I grew up here my whole life, and I never knew that the Kensington Expressway was built because of environmental racism. I didn't even really know what environmental racism was until I got to college. And I like to think I'm a pretty educated person, but that's how insidious it is. They make it so people don't know that this is what's going on and why they're doing these things. So we really can't uplift environmental justice without uplifting racial justice for our natives, for our Black brothers and sisters. One of the things I like to say about Black Lives Matter is we don't just want Black people to stop getting killed by the police. We want them to stop being killed by the contaminants in our air, water, everywhere.
Right.
So it's all very much related.
Right. Yes.
Well, I think one of the things we could look at in terms of this is it's going to be several years that will be probably several years before we'll have our environmental impact statement on how West Valley is finally left. And I think it's absolutely critical that people in Buffalo and Indigenous and people of color get involved in the argument to say the whole thing needs to be cleaned up because we don't want, this stuff coming down the pike, even in, 3,000 years or 2,000 years or 1,000 years or 100 years, however long it might take. We're really concerned that we're going to get all the information we need jammed in within a couple of months, and we're just not that many people studying this. So if we could get loads of people involved, putting pressure on before these studies even come out, I think that government officials then will start paying a little bit more attention. And if there's any way we could, join together to do that and just in terms of an educational campaign, that would be absolutely wonderful because people think it's out here and it doesn't affect them. And the thing about West Valley is when they do these kinds of studies, the worst possible scenario that the Department of Energy tends to use is a man who accidentally builds his house right on the site of this stuff that's left there. That is the worst case. Well, yeah, it would be the worst case scenario for that poor guy. It would be. But in terms of the issues coming out of West Valley, it's not that this guy would get the biggest dose. It's that this constant seepage of radioactivity could be poisoning, people drinking the water in the city of Buffalo. That's the worst thing that can happen. But that is not the way they do these kinds of formulas. They develop formulas. And the worst thing is somebody building, a house on site. We have to stop. We have to show our elected officials that this is kind of I assume, unintentionally bogus way of determining the worst thing that could happen. And we've talked to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission a little bit about this. So
one of the things that I wonder about is when you said, well, it can't be for past pollution. But the thing is, even though the actions were taken in the past, and they were very stupid ones, but they were taken in the past, but the pollution is current because it's right there. I mean, it's there. It's right there. So there's, no matter who did it, why they did, this is how it ends up with the Superfund thing, because it still exists and it's still that danger for the community. And one of the things that they have, there's a plume, and there's some, questions about how deep it's going in the ground, whether it's going in the creek, how much has
Right.
already gone in the creek from overfill. And then when they talk about rain bombs, that now there are times when, there'll be ferocious, absolutely just buckets of rain that just, it's like a rain bomb, right? And so on this unstable ground, and then with these, with all this nuclear waste, that then it's all being carried into this and goes down in the stream through the res into the 40% of the world's fresh water supply and the buffalo
Right.
drinking supply, and everybody else's too, because back to, what the nature of water and the nature of pollution in water, that it just spreads. So
We're just looking at. I mean, that's what we used to say in the 1960s and 70s when we were old hippies. Dilution is the solution to pollution, right?
delusion. Oh,
Something never
delusion.
changed.
Delusion. Oh,
Delusion.
delusion. Yeah, well, that's.
We're both.
I can't hear you. La 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 la. So,
Yeah.
so this is why it really needs to be included, because it really needs to be dealt with, because it just has to be dealt with. And no matter who did it, when they did it, why they did it, doesn't matter. It's very current and real that it exists in that space.
Yeah. And, monitors would be great, but air and water monitors, but given that might not be a possibility, at least working together towards some educational campaigns or being included in anything that's done would be really useful, just to get the people of Buffalo aware of what's going on, would be helpful.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to team up for some teach-ins and some events.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what this is. That's what different events that we've had over the years are. So there are, it's back to, and when we try to tease out what's really going on, well, there's lots of people who know about it. There's lots of people who don't know about it. There's everything in between. There's people who sort of know, but they don't really get it. Or there's people who know, but think they don't need to care. Or, but there's lots of people who don't know. I'm sure of that too.
Yes, I'm sure too.
Yeah. So we can definitely help with that. And again, this is just an effort towards that. But the other thing is, this is where, as these other bills and other things are being set up, that both in the specifics and in the general, that this is being included. So that this might specifically be mentioned, because I know one of the things is looking at the individual places and what the needs are, what the wants and needs are in those places, right? Isn't it? For the community, for the CCIA. I think one of the things is there's an effort to go to different places and say, what are your issues? What do you need? What are your resources? And what are your obstacles? Right? And so this would be a big one for our Western New York area, is all the nuclear waste that we have in Western New York, including in Niagara Falls, where there was an expose about how one of the most expensive streets in the area was the roadway, when they had the road was being dug up. Do you remember this, Kathy? The road was being dug up. I want to say this is like 10 years ago, maybe. It was some kind of a French name. I don't remember the name of it. But the road was being dug up, and the contractors stopped and said, when they found out that it was nuclear, that there was the radioactivity in the fill that had been used for the roadway, they said, we can't do this anymore. We're not qualified. We don't know how, and we're not doing it. And it was the biggest hush-hush thing, because all these people had very expensive houses, and they didn't want to know, and they didn't want other people to know that there was nuclear waste right there.
Well, I think in terms of, Kelly, I think including mistakes like West Valley is important, because it sort of helps people and our elected officials know what didn't work, what doesn't work, and how expensive those mistakes are. And we have to keep that in the front of their mind. I mean, I think the present administration is still talking about fusion. The last I heard, I don't know if that's changed, and or nuclear power. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. It was Bill Gates who's out there talking about fusion now. We have to get this out of the whole picture, and it's just telling people what can happen with a place that's got a lot of waste, and reminding people that these fuel rods are sitting at nuclear power plants now with nowhere to go. So
exactly,
yeah,
and no one wants them. So that's the other thing, and so that is it Yucca Mountain or something?
yes, in Nevada.
Yeah. So that has gotten a lot of it. So that's again on indigenous land. That's
Mm-hmm.
again a crime against against indigenous rights and treaty rights, etc. So there's no good place because there's nothing to do. I mean, back to as you're saying, we can't consider nuclear as a feasible part of our solution. Because
And it's not just here. I spent some time in Australia, and Agnes Williams got me in touch with some indigenous people in Alice Springs area, and in the whole area up in the sort of north. The government was looking at taking nuclear waste from Europe, and going to the indigenous communities and asking them if they wanted it put there, and if they did, they would reimburse them. And some of the indigenous women I met with said, we should be getting this reimbursement anyway. They can't be bribing us with nuclear waste. So it's all over the world. I mean, there's just nowhere.
Right.
Nowhere. And when people do try to put it somewhere, it's often indigenous people that suffer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I do think that this legislation has a lot of promise. And I think that part of it is what we make it and what we continue to make it as it goes along. So I know, we want people to. Now, there's lobby days coming up, right? April 5th through 9th or something?
Yeah, I got some dates for you. You want me to drop some dates? So April 5th through the 9th, New Yorker News and New York Invisible are all organizing for the Climate and Community Investment Act. We're doing a whole week along with the Thrive Agenda, just fighting for climate, jobs, and justice at the state and federal level. So Monday, what we're doing is we're kicking off the week of action with this huge virtual rally call featuring legislative champions and movement leaders. Rawa from our org Push Buffalo, that she's going to be on as a speaker. We will talk about why now and going through all the ways people can help build power and momentum to pass the CCIA and thrive. So that's going to be at noon. Most of these are going to be virtual. So a lot of them can be found on the Action Network. If you look up New Yorker News on the Action Network, you should be able to find them. Just so I'm not explicitly dropping links for folks. It's going to be a lot of words, numbers, spaces, special characters. So then all week long, we're going to continue virtual meetings with state legislators and demanding they co-sponsor and champion the CCIA. And so those will be happening all over. So you can find the one that's closest to you. So this way you're getting your representatives. On Wednesday, we're holding small socially distanced rallies across the state in support of the CCIA and Thrive. So the action that I'm leading along with several other volunteers and members will be in Niagara Square at 4 p.m. There will be snacks because Kelly Camacho does not like to meet in person unless there are snacks. So I will be feeding folks. We'll be doing some sign workshops. We'll be having a grand old time and kind of celebrating joy as we try to get the CCIA passed. And then on Friday, there's going to be a huge town hall with State Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and several other leaders. So folks can directly ask questions about climate, jobs, and justice recovery. So feel free to come on. If you can't join us in person, definitely join us virtually. There's going to be a ton of opportunities to participate. So if anybody has any questions or wants to get involved, they can email me at Kelly, Kelly @pushbuffalo.org. I do also take calls and texts, so if anybody wants to reach me, I'm available at 716-818-9586. And yeah, love to get folks involved.
You know that the Western New York Peace Center does want to co-sponsor all of those efforts, that week of lobbying and et cetera. So
yeah, I got your email, Vicki. I will definitely make sure that we are linked up for those.
We're on the list. Make sure we get all the information. Then we're going to have the job of getting it all up on our website and on our Facebook page and on our Twitter account and everything else. So it's back to this, well, just building, building together, a movement for people on the planet. I mean, that's what we need in every kind of a way. And I want to mention the one thing that we don't mention very often, but that all of those kinds of justice also require that nonviolence and that stopping of the imperialism, the colonialism, and especially the militarism, which is hugely polluting, which is the biggest source of pollution on the planet. And again, and it's also often about taking other people's resources and everything else, which again, back to pollution, dislocation, extraction, in every sense of the word. So that militarism is just got to go. It's right up there with all the other ways that people get hurt, that people on the planet are so damaged and so hurt because of, people not, pursuing principles in the spirit. I mean, that's the way I look at it, is that if we do things with the right principles in mind, right, which are about truth, compassion, restraint, or sharing, or so many different things that we could talk about. If we are really using those principles and we're doing things in the spirit of cooperation, of collaboration, of putting people on the planet first, we are going to be able to solve those things. And that's why it makes perfect sense what the CCIA is about, what Thrive is about. Using our resources to care for each other and for the planet.
Kelly, I have such respect for what you've done, and I thank you, because I look at a place like West Valley, and because there was no kind of overall, as you were just saying, Vicki, thought process about the integrity of a project. They came into a small town that was basically had been a farming town. Farming now was becoming more difficult because of big farming. People were losing their kids to, going to Buffalo, going to other places to get jobs because they couldn't stay in the community. So when Governor Rockefeller came in and said the streets will be paved with gold and you'll have all these jobs, the people there, bless their hearts, jumped at it. They wanted to keep their families there. They wanted the small town life they'd always had. And the government took over by eminent domain, a lot of farms, a lot of property. People were heartbroken by that. And within, I don't know, a few years, those jobs were gone. And it basically taking advantage of a deteriorating community and knowing darn well that there would be very few local people hired in the long run, taking advantage rather than saying to that community, how can we help you? How can we reinvest in, something else? The kind of thing you're talking about. It's so critical we do that all at the same time, that we don't just talk about what we've lost, but we talk about what we can do about it, what we can gain, how we can rebuild. So thank you for what you do. It's tremendous.
And thank you for you as well. And you too, Vicki. All of these things contribute. Like, all of this activism, it happens on a spectrum, and it requires all of us to do our part to be able to get this done.
Right.
Yep. Vicki, it takes you to make those connections.
Oh, thanks. Well, I think it is all connected, and we are all connected. So I feel very hopeful right now, and I feel like change is really happening. Is that people are really, and it has to be. It has to be. And I think back, so much when I think about principles in the spirit, I'm thinking of Dr. King and how the Western New York Peace Center was started as part of Dr. King's Clergy and Lady Concerned. And I think of two things. Well, one, he said, unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. But he also said, and he said, it's always the right time to do the right thing. But he also said that there is such a thing as too late. So I think people feel that, and this is one of the ways that things are getting ratcheted up now. In everything just seems to be getting more intense. So the impulses to the good are are stronger, and also the grabbing and extractive mindset is also that much greater. So it just seems to be, we just need to, keep our courage up and keep connecting with each other and keep working for what we know makes sense.
Hmm.
And it does make sense. So it's about doing things differently. Another way is possible and another world is possible.
Hmm.
If people start, what actually Cornell West says, moral integrity and universal solidarity. If we're using those. So actually, I can't believe it that we are almost at the end of our time. So I want to say it's so wonderful having both of you on, and I appreciate you both so much and all the wonderful work that you're both doing and how much fun it is doing it with you. So if you want to just give a couple of your thoughts of what you'd like, how people can help. Some, maybe immediate things of how people can help, just sort of what you want to leave people with on this, each of you.
Go ahead,
And pass my time right on to Kathy because I definitely dropped a whole lot of information.
No, I call your local representatives, state, local. Look and ask them to look into this whole issue of the main plant process building at West Valley going down without a cover over it. I can get some links for you if you can put them on your site, Vicki. We can ask people to come back there and look for some links. I'll try to collect those over the next couple of days and send them on to you because there's several different ideas I think about how to make some change, and also to think about staying involved especially if you're young, because I may not even be around by the time that the site is finally left in its final state, but young people will be, and we need new blood. So I will also give my contact information that you can put on, Vicki, and people can get a hold of me and
you're a special representative. Anyway, so you give it to me, and I'll tell Charlie. I know Charlie's working on
Charlie.
it.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
So we'll put it on the Environmental Justice Task Force page on our WNYPC.org website. And also, Kelly, you get me that information. I know you've already given me some of it, probably given me all of it. It's just on me to put it on. So, but we'll make sure we'll connect. After tomorrow. Of course, we have tomorrow, or we have lots of things. So April 1st is a rally is that rally for no pipelines. But meanwhile, we have plenty of things that will be coming up, and the lobby days from the 5th to the 9th, April 5th to the 9th, and we'll come out to West Valley. Well, I don't know if the water walk is not planned for this year, as far as I heard.
Not as far as I know. I don't.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So there'll be other times for that, other times and ways. Well, I just want to say, it's been so great having you both here. Any other final thought you want to share?
Make polluters pay. Let's pass the CCIA.
Yes.
Yay.
We're getting it done in 2021. So we'll definitely pass the CCIA and Thrive. You can get in touch with your state and federal representatives for both of those things. And which did you say for West Valley we should get in touch with? Both?
I would, yeah, both. I mean, our state representatives have been very, very good about helping us maintain and get more funding for West Valley. But talk to your people in Buffalo. Talk to city council members. Crystal Peoples-Stokes has been really, really involved.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, so she's somebody to keep talking to in her office. Yep.
Yep, we'll keep all of them posted, and everybody, do what you can. You do what you can when you can, and together we're all going to get it done. So this has been Talking Peace, and together we have been talking peace in truth and love. Thanks so much. Thank you both so very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure for me. It's great. We'll have you both back on the show, and we've got plenty more to do. Think about coming with us to Minnesota.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, we're thinking maybe May, maybe June. We'll just see.
Okay.
Anyway,
It'll be a lot
Nice
of
to
fun.
meet you, Kelly.
It was nice to meet you too.
thank you both
Thank
so
you.
much. Big
All right, I'll
hugs,
see you tomorrow, Vicki.
big hugs and love. We'll see you. Yes, we'll see you
Bye-bye.
tomorrow. We'll see you another day. Take care. Thank you so much, Kathy.
You're welcome, Vicki. Thank you. Take care.
That was great. Take care. Bye for now.